Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 864. I had white pieces and started off with d4. My opponent went d5. I went with c4. So I'm playing the Queen's Gambit. He played e6, the classical Queen's Gambit declined. I went knight c3. And he went to bishop b4. I called this the Rogozin, although technically it's not, just to show you what the real Rogozin variation is. It's knight here. Knight f6 is really the main move there. And then white usually brings out another knight in this position. And then bishop b4 is the Rogozin variation. And there's different responses. Looks like the top three choices are taking, the pawn on d5. That will prevent the c-pawn from becoming doubled. Bishop to g5, just setting up a counter pin. And then queen a4 check. I mentioned this during the game. It's kind of an interesting way to play, but it doesn't actually lead to any big advantage to white. I mean, I think it's okay, and white probably still has some opening edge, but the way it's typically played, black is okay too. So sound way to play with bishop breaking the pin. We could have maybe transposed into something like this in the game, but well, I didn't play that way. So he went bishop b4 immediately. And I just went knight f3, so a normal developing move. You can see that's the top choice in this position. Queen a4 check could have been played here. Like I said, we could have gotten into some kind of similar position. And then he went ahead and took here, so that's very rare. Normally, if he had played knight f6 right here, he would have transposed back into a mainline Rogozin, or into a mainline Rogozin. But he avoided that by taking. And I played e4. E3 is slightly preferable, apparently. If you play e3, first of all, the d-pawn is solidly defended, and secondly, sometimes there are tactics along this diagonal. If he plays, for example, pawn to b5 to support this pawn, you could pop the knight up here and bring the queen out to f3 with a double attack on f7 there and the rook. So there are tactical reasons behind this e3 move, although it looks a little bit counterintuitive. E4 is also okay and also leads to an advantage for white. So even though he's doing his hardest to hold on to this extra pawn, it really should not have worked. And we'll come to the critical mistake in a moment. And black should really just give the pawn back at this point by playing knight f6, continue with his development. And here I have a choice between pinning, leaving that pawn under fire, or going ahead and taking immediately and equalizing the material. Both of those are fine for white and lead to some kind of opening edge, typical opening advantage. But he avoided all of that by taking my knight, and so we're just out of the opening book. And after I take back, he plays b5. So he's trying to hold on to the pawn, but he actually can't keep it, and this is quite a good position for white. White has a bigger than normal opening advantage. And let's see, I play okay at first. I play a4, immediately putting pressure on the pawn. I mean, the one thing that this kind of play has going for it is a bit tricky, and you have to be very tactically alert to play against it as white. So the first trick everyone should know is if he defends with the a-pawn, you take here, and because of this pin, the rook in the corner is undefended. You just get the pawn back immediately. So I have to defend with the c-pawn. And then I didn't think that taking here would lead to a whole lot. The chess engine actually wants to ignore this whole situation now. It liked a4, but now it just wants to play e5, which would prevent this knight from coming to f6. And then play with knight g5, and then after a move like, say, knight f5, continue with h4, and it actually says that white has a winning attack here. So this is one way to punish black's play. Black has made all these moves on the queen side and has only one piece developed. Now, white also only has one piece developed, but the queen can get over here very quickly, and the rook also can hop into the game. So, and the bishop is already pointing in this direction. This rook has some good files to look at as well. So even though it seems like white's development isn't that much in advance of black's, it's more than enough for the pawn in terms of his development and his center control and the potential for a kingside attack here. So anyway, that's one way to play. But even if you don't spot this bishop a3 move was also, it was actually the second choice of the engine after the e5 move. You know, it stops black from castling at least for a move. It's a good diagonal. Just, you know, build up your lead in development at the moment if you don't see any immediate tactics. And then, let's see, he went knight e7, so he wants to castle. I went bishop e2. The chess engine prefers queen d2 here. I guess it's the same kind of idea. The queen is coming out to the king side and just playing for the attack. But bishop e2 is not a bad move. It also keeps an advantage. And then after bishop b7, we both castle. I could have played rook b1 immediately. This is also good, but rook b1 is the correct move here. And after a6, this is where I made my mistake. I went ahead and took right away. Actually, I can exploit the pin. I don't have to take on b5 first. I can just take immediately with my bishop, and this leads to a position where white white's got the pawn back, white has the bishop pair, and white has more space in the center. So pretty good, maybe even close to winning position for white. So that's the way to play it. And so this move is what lets black into the game. I took first, and now he has a counter tactic. At this point, I spotted the idea of grabbing the pawn and exploiting this pin, but he can also take a pawn, and he gets a center pawn. So actually, black is a little better now. I just totally missed that I was hanging my e-pawn. So just like that, the game turned from being good for white to good for black. Let's see, I need to, in fact, give up this bishop. My bishop was hanging, my rook was hanging, so this is pretty much the only move. He takes, I take, there he goes, rook e8. He wants to be able to move his queen, I guess, without having to worry about defending that knight. Let's see, I went rook fe1. I'm still thinking of maybe exploiting some kind of pin on the d file, but there's nothing there. And this is probably a good move, even though I can chase it back. It seems to be okay for black. And then c4. c4 is just trying too hard. I really need to kind of sit on the position here. Well, actually, not sit on it exactly. I need to play with my pieces and not do anything more with the pawns. I can't really do a whole lot over here. I just have to kind of ignore the queenside situation and just start pointing my pieces at black's king and try to get counterplay that way. So this is a position where I am a pawn down, right? It's 5 pawns to 6, but I have enough play with my pieces. So even though black is better, it's not like black is winning or even a full pawn ahead. I have some compensation for the pawn if I play directly. So this is my second error, if you want to call it that. Just pushing too hard here. And now, after this, black can build up a pretty good advantage. The best way, I think, is to actually take it. What did he do? He went knight g6, so brought his knight out to kick my rook. And then he went knight c6. So he's got his pieces developed, and my pawns are under pressure. I went ahead and took on b5 here. He took back. And, you know, I am getting my pawn back, but after this, yeah, he had a chance to keep his advantage with the move e5. So this was his mistake. He managed to, because of my mistakes, he managed to get an edge, but he didn't keep the edge. And he had to play this move e5 right here, taking advantage of the pin. So, and the fact that his knights, he's got both knights supporting the e-pawn. So I can't really do a whole lot about it. I suppose I could push my pawn forward, but he can pile up on my e-pawn. So anyway, this is a good position for black. Let's see, the chess engine's line goes like this. Rook b7 to kick his queen. That's why I was lining up those rooks, to try and do that. And then queen b3 to try and force a trade. And then I have to take with this rook because my my bishop would be hanging otherwise. And in this endgame, black is slightly better, but white has chances to hold. So that's the way that it should have been played here. So he should have played e5 here. Anyway, he went rook to b8. And after this, actually, the game is completely even, and stays even all the way up to the end. So the interesting parts are are already past us. Yeah, I mean, there's some maneuvering to be done here, but it seems like neither side can get much of an advantage. So no mistakes by either side in this part. He's keeping pressure on my bishop. I'm trying to dissolve this pawn. I realized I couldn't take back right away, but I can move my bishop with tempo and then grab the pawn back. So I basically managed to liquidate my weak pawn, trade it off against his pawn, and there's no pin here, so you know, things are just about even. Let's see, he goes knight f6, went queen over to b5. He gives his king a little lift. I do the same, and maybe in a good day I will push forward and harass his knight. And so he moved his knight ahead of time, and he went knight to e4. Oh, but he didn't move this knight. He moved the other knight. He went knight to e4, attacking my bishop. Yeah, and he just neglected to notice that when I put my queen over here, I was putting pressure on his rook, and he just left that undefended. So after queen takes here, it's resign. He just resigned there. So instead of that move, queen a8 was given by the chess engine. This defends the rook, defends the back rank. And now the knight is free to move. Or he could leave the knight where it is and just play an aggressive move like queen to a2. That was also on the list in terms of the chess engine suggestions. He just has to be a little more cautious here and not leave his pieces hanging like that. So anyway, let's go back to the game. It ended up in this position where he resigned. So a short game, but anyway, I wanted to check out that opening and show how, once again, holding on to that pawn in the queen's gambit declined or accepted. He was kind of accepting it a move or two later. Holding on to that pawn, grabbing it and holding on to it in the queen's gambit is probably not a good idea if white knows how to play it. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you soon. Bye.